October 25th, 1944, the Philippine Sea. Dawn. The horizon burns red. A low mist curls above the Pacific as the first light catches a line of small, gray silhouettes. Ships that look almost fragile against the vastness of the ocean. They are the Taffy 3 task unit of the United States Navy. Tiny escort carriers, destroyers, and destroyer escorts. No battleships, no cruisers, no heavy guns. To the Japanese Navy, these ships are a joke. The floating coffins. Slow, thinly armored, built on merchant hulls, and carrying aircraft barely armed for self-defense. Yet, within hours, these same ships will face one of the most powerful naval forces ever assembled. Battleships, heavy cruisers, and the legendary Yamato, armed with 18-inch guns that can hurl shells the size of small cars. What happens next will defy all logic and turn ridicule into reverence. When the United States entered the war in 1941, its Navy faced a problem of scale. Fleet carriers like Enterprise and Yorktown were powerful, but few. They took years to build. America needed something faster, something that could bring aircraft to the fight, even if it couldn't take much punishment. So the shipyards built escort carriers, small mass-produced vessels made from converted merchant hulls. They were slow, barely 19 knots, and could carry maybe 24 planes. To the fleet carrier crews, they were little brothers, helpful but expendable. To the sailors who served on them, they were home, cramped, noisy, and constantly rolling in rough seas. The Japanese called them second-class carriers. Their own officers, studying reconnaissance photos, laughed. The Americans send floating barns to war. But those barns could still launch aircraft, and in the Pacific, that meant they mattered. By mid-1944, the escort carriers were everywhere, providing air cover for convoys, supporting amphibious landings, rescuing downed pilots, and hunting submarines. They were the workhorses of the Pacific, unseen, underappreciated, but indispensable. And as the Allies prepared to invade the Philippines, they would become the shield between chaos and annihilation. October 1944, the Philippines. The heart of Japan's defensive perimeter. General Douglas MacArthur had promised, "I shall return." Now that promise was being kept. The U.S. invasion of Leyte began with a thunder of naval gunfire and the roar of aircraft from massive fleet carriers farther east. But the Taffy groups, 3 small task units known as Taffy 1, Taffy 2, and Taffy 3, had a quieter role. Their mission: provide close air support for the troops storming the beaches and protect the landing zones. Each Taffy consisted of 6 escort carriers and a handful of destroyers. Taffy 3, commanded by Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague, was the northernmost group. Its flagship, the USS Fanshawe Bay, CVE-70. Sprague's ships carried only about 150 aircraft total, a mix of FM-2 Wildcats for defense and TBM Avengers for bombing. Their nearest support, Admiral Halsey's fast carrier fleet, was hundreds of miles away chasing a decoy. Sprague didn't know it yet, but Taffy 3 was about to stand alone against the entire Japanese center force. While the Americans prepared their landings, the Japanese Navy launched a desperate gamble, Operation Shogo. The plan: lure Halsey's fast carriers north with a decoy fleet of empty carriers, while the real hammer, Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force, came through the San Bernardino Strait to attack the invasion fleet from behind. Kurita's armada was terrifying. Yamato and Musashi, the largest battleships ever built, dozens of cruisers and destroyers, thousands of sailors hardened by years of war. Their guns could outrange anything the Americans had near Leyte. On the evening of October 24th, as Taffy 3's crews ate dinner and wrote letters home, Kurita's fleet slipped through the strait unseen. At dawn, they emerged, a wall of steel, smoke, and gun barrels, heading straight for Sprague's tiny task unit. October 25, 1944, 6:37 a.m. Lookouts aboard USS Fanshawe Bay spotted flashes on the horizon. At first they thought it was lightning. Then came the rumble. "Shells!" someone shouted. "Big ones!" Moments later the ocean erupted around them, geysers of water leaping 100 feet into the air. The Japanese had opened fire from over 20 miles away. Sprague stared in disbelief. Reports came flooding in. Multiple battleships approaching. Cruiser force confirmed. Dozens of them. He realized instantly what had happened. Halsey was gone. Taffy 3 was alone. And the largest battleships in history were bearing down on a group of slow, thin-skinned escort carriers. Sprague had three choices: run, surrender, or fight. He chose the only one that honored his men. Open fire. Launch everything that can fly. From the small decks of the escort carriers, aircraft scrambled one after another, Wildcats and Avengers clawing for altitude through the smoke. Many had no armor-piercing bombs. Some carried only depth charges, meant for submarines. But they went anyway. Aboard USS Gambier Bay, Ensign Charles Cole remembered looking up and seeing the sky full of planes. "We didn't have the weapons," he said later. "So we threw courage instead." The carriers turned south, laying down smokescreens, while the destroyers, Johnston, Howell, and Heermann, turned toward the enemy. 3 destroyers against an entire fleet. The first to charge was USS Johnston, DD 557, commanded by Commander Ernest E. Evans, a Cherokee officer known for his fearlessness. He barked to his crew, "We're going in! Give 'em hell!" The Johnston accelerated to flank speed, 35 knots, charging straight through walls of shell fire. Evans ordered torpedoes fired at the lead Japanese heavy cruiser. 2 struck home. A column of fire shot skyward as the cruiser Kumano staggered out of formation. But now the Johnston was spotted. Shells rained down. A direct hit tore into her bridge. Evans lost 2 fingers, his face bloodied, but he refused to leave. He turned his crippled ship around and attacked again. "We're in the middle of 'em," he radioed. "Let's keep after the bastards." Behind him, the escort carriers were taking punishment. Gambier Bay was hit repeatedly by 8-inch shells from the Japanese cruisers. Her thin hull offered no resistance. Flooding rapidly, she began to list. A sailor remembered hearing the captain's voice. "Abandon ship. God bless you all." As Gambier Bay slipped beneath the waves, the only American carrier ever sunk by surface gunfire, her surviving aircrew circled overhead, helpless, watching the sea swallow their home. But even as the carriers burned, their aircraft fought like lions. Wildcats dove again and again, strafing cruiser decks. Avengers dropped torpedoes at mast height, threading through sheets of flak. One pilot, his bombs gone, made multiple dummy runs just to draw fire from the ships still escaping. The sea was chaos, smoke, flame, wreckage, and courage. The destroyer Hull took over where Johnston fell silent. Hit more than 40 times, burning fiercely, her guns still fired. Nearby, the destroyer escort Samuel B. Roberts, barely half the size of a destroyer, charged into the fight. Lieutenant Robert Copeland, her captain, told his crew, "This will be a fight against overwhelming odds. We will do what damage we can." They did more than that. The Roberts closed to within 4,000 yards of the heavy cruiser Chokai and fired her 5-inch guns so fast they overheated. The cruiser was left smoking and crippled. When the Roberts finally sank, sailors said it went down, still firing. Amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. Admiral Kurita hesitated. His flagship, Yamato, had been under constant attack from planes and destroyers for hours. Smoke and confusion filled the sea. Reports poured in, exaggerated, fragmented. "We are under attack by major carrier forces. Enemy torpedoes inbound from multiple bearings." To Kurita, it looked like he'd stumbled into the main U.S. carrier fleet. He didn't realize he was facing a handful of escort carriers and destroyers. At 9:20 a.m., Without warning, Kurita ordered his fleet to withdraw. The Japanese ships turned north, leaving behind burning wreckage and stunned American survivors who could scarcely believe it. Taffy 3 had survived. They had faced battleships with tin-hulled carriers and won, through chaos, grit, and an unbreakable will. By the time the smoke cleared, Taffy 3 had lost 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, and 1 destroyer escort. Hundreds of men were dead or adrift at sea, but they had turned back an entire Japanese fleet. When Admiral William Halsey received the reports, he could hardly believe them. Destroyers attacking battleships and winning? The news spread quickly through the Pacific. To every sailor, it was a story of impossible courage. The Japanese, once mocking, now whispered in disbelief. Their most powerful fleet had been humiliated, not by might, but by sheer determination. In the months that followed, the term jeep carrier changed meaning forever. No longer were they floating coffins. They were symbols of innovation, audacity, and courage under fire. The Battle off Samar became one of the most studied naval engagements in history, a case where leadership, improvisation, and bravery overcame overwhelming odds. Commander Evans of the Johnston was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. His citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty." Admiral Sprague later wrote, "The men of Taffy 3 were magnificent. They were what every commander dreams of. Men who do not know the meaning of fear." Years later, when survivors of both sides met in peacetime, Japanese officers admitted their astonishment. One former cruiser captain said quietly, "We thought your ships were weak, but they fought like tigers. We could not understand such madness." That madness was courage, the kind born not from power, but from duty. The escort carriers, once mocked as floating coffins, had rewritten the rules of naval warfare. They proved that a ship's worth isn't T, measured in steel or speed, but in the resolve of those aboard. The Pacific, years later. Waves crash gently against a rusting anchor half buried in coral, all that remains of one of Taffy 3's ships. A single seagull circles overhead as sunlight filters through the clouds. The sea is calm again. A narrator's voice. "They said these ships were too small to matter. They said their crews were too weak to fight. But when history called, they stood, and the world remembered." The screen fades to black. A faint echo of engines, the hum of courage, lingers. White text appears, dedicated to the sailors of Task Unit 77.4. 3. Taffy 3. Their stand at Samar changed the Pacific War, and the meaning of bravery itself.